Welcome to my channel. My name is Bas and in this video I'm going to show you how I knit on one of my knitting machines. It's this machine. You can easily lift it off the table. It has rubber feet to prevent it from sliding around, and it is a Knittax machine, a Knittax M2 to be precise. It's a basic machine, very simple, very straightforward and a lot of fun to use. I'm going to show you how. Okay, so this is the knitting machine. We have a needle bed with needles. These needles can be set in different positions. All the way to the back, like they are now, needles are out of work. They do nothing. When I take the carriage across, nothing happens. About halfway to the front, it doesn't really matter because the carriage will put them in the exact position, but about halfway needles are in knitting position. If I take the carriage across now, the needles will move. You can see it over here. The needles move, they will knit. When I put my needles all the way to the front, they are in holding position. The needles do not knit. Usually you have some yarn on the needles and sometimes you want some needles to knit and some not to knit. And then you put needles in holding position. When I take the carriage across now, the needles do not knit. The needles on this machine have latches. You see the latches over here. And a latch, this is a closed latch and this is an open latch. When you lay in the yarn in the needle, you lay the yarn in the needle hook in front of the latch. If the latch is closed, like this, and you lay the yarn on top, it will fall off the machine and it does not knit. So always make sure you check that all the latches of all your needles are open. Then this machine has sinkers. Sinkers are these black little plates. They are spring loaded and they push the knitting down. Then we have the carriage. The carriage has several knobs and levers, but for this video I will focus only on the row counter, so you know on what row you are, and the tension dial. The tension dial has tension settings from 1 to 10 and it depends on the size yarn you're using. So normally most knitting machines like about a 4-ply. That's the easiest yarn for a regular knitting machine. This machine is very simple, so the yarn is placed on the floor. Whoop, there it goes. There are several ways to cast on. You have an open cast on and you have a closed cast on. An open cast on is usually made for test swatches, quick setups. It will unravel, and a closed cast on is usually used to start a garment or some piece of fabric that does not unravel. First off, I'm going to show you the open cast on. I have my needles into working position. I place my carriage at the left hand side. All my needles are perfectly aligned now. I check that all my latches are open and not all of them are open, so I am opening them now. All the latches are open. I hook my yarn in the yarn stopper on the left side of the machine. I lay my yarn into the needle hooks. I slightly tension the yarn with my right hand and you take the carriage across. That's the first row. You hook your yarn under the rightmost sinker. You lay the yarn into the needle hooks. That's in front of the latches. All the latches are open and you take the carriage across. That's the second row. You hook your yarn under the sinker to the left of the far left needle. You lay the yarn into the needle hooks in front of the latches, I check that all my latches are open and I take my carriage across. And you continue like this. And there you have your first piece of cloth. As I told you, it's an open cast on. So when I pull the cord, my knitting unravels. When I take the carriage across without laying in any yarn, the knitting will fall off the machine. Okay, let's continue with the closed cast on. I put my carriage on the right hand side. I hook my yarn in the yarn stopper on the left hand side of the machine. I place the yarn under a sinker and I wrap the first needle counterclockwise. Under the next sinker, counterclockwise over a needle. Under the sinker, counterclockwise over a needle. Under a 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 sinker, counterclockwise over a needle. I have now e-wrapped all my needles. Before I lay in my yarn, I check that all my latches are open, and they are not. So I open all my latches. I hook my yarn under the sinker to the right of my far rightmost needle. I lay it into the needle hooks and I take my carriage across to the left. Now I have knitted a row. I hook my yarn under the sinker, lay it into the needle hooks, check that all my latches are open and take the carriage across. And you continue like this. Now you have knitted a piece of fabric. And this does not unravel. I can pull on the yarn what I want, but it's a closed cast on, so it will not unravel. Okay, so basically now you can knit a rectangle if you keep going. But in order to make a garment, you need to shape the garment. So you need to be able to increase and decrease. There are several ways to do so, and I will show you how. The easiest way to add a stitch is to put an extra needle into work on the side of the carriage. Make sure the latch is open. Hook the yarn under the sinker to the left of the needle. Lay the yarn in the needle hooks and take the carriage across. You have now added one stitch. You can do the same on the other side. Put one extra needle into working position, make sure the latch is open, hook the yarn under the sinker, lay it into the needle hooks and take the carriage across. And you have added another stitch. You can also increase by shifting the stitches a needle to the side. That's called a full fashioned increase. You shift the stitches to the side and you fill the empty needle with a purl bump from the stitch next to it. I will show you how. I'm going to take my transfer tool, in this case my 2-prong tool, and I'm going to shift the stitches one needle to the left. So I place my tool over the two needles, push the needles backward, the stitches slide onto the tool, lift the stitches up and slide them over one needle to the left. Hook the tool into the needles and flip the stitches onto the needles. Pull the needles through and back. Now my two stitches are behind the latches. Now I have an empty needle. I need to fill this needle with the purl bump from the adjacent stitch. and you can pick it up from the stitch to the side. Put all needles into working position. Make sure all stitches are behind the latches, under the sinkers. If you need to, you can lift the sinkers up. Lay the yarn in, lay the yarn into the needle hooks and take the carriage across. You have now added one stitch. If you want to make multiple increases, for example 4 needles, you do the same as when casting on. You hook your yarn under a sinker, wrap it counterclockwise over a needle, under a sinker, over a needle, under a sinker, over a needle, under a sinker, over a needle. Make sure that all the yarn is behind the latches are open, the needles are in working position. Lay the yarn in the needle hooks and take the carriage across. You have now added 4 stitches to the right. If you want to decrease a stitch, you put 2 needles together. So you take your transfer tool, you hook it into the needle, you push the needle back so the stitch slides onto the needle, and you put it on the needle next to it, like so. You pull the needle forward so both stitches are behind the latches, and you push the needle back to working position. You hook your yarn under a sinker, you lay it into the needles and you take your carriage across. And now you have made 1 decrease. Same on the other side. Transfer tool into the needle hook, push the needle backwards, lift the stitch up from the machine and flip it onto the needle next to it. Pull the needle forward so both stitches are behind the latches, push the needle back into working position. Lay the yarn under the sinker, into the needle hooks and take the carriage across. And you've decreased another stitch. If you want to decrease multiple stitches, it's almost the same. You put your transfer tool into the needle hook, push the needle backwards, the stitch slides onto the tool. You move the stitch to the needle next to it, push the needle forward so both stitches are behind the latches, push the needle back into working position and manually knit the stitch by laying over the yarn into the needle hook and manually knitting the needle backwards. Now you have made 1 decrease and you can continue to do so for all decreases you want to make. Put your needle into the needle hook, push the needle forward, transfer the stitch onto the transfer tool, put it on the adjacent needle, pull the needle forward, both stitches are behind the latches, pull the needle back into working position, wrap the yarn into the needle hook and manually knit it. Now you made a decrease. If you want to cast off, it's exactly the same. You just continue decreasing until you reach the end. When you come to the final stitch, break off the yarn, and pull it through the last stitch. And now you have cast off your knitting. Okay, so now you know how to cast on, how to increase, how to decrease, and how to cast off. So basically you can make a simple garment now. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please leave a like. I wish you happy knitting and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!